The coast lay shimmering under a pale summer haze, a place where sea and sky mingled in a single luminous breath. On the bluff above the water, a garden heavy with roses and wild mint trembled in the heat. There, among the tall grass and drifting scents, Phil and Vinka spent their afternoons, two figures caught between childhood and something unnamed, something waiting. They had come every summer since they could remember, their laughter mingling with the cry of gulls, their bodies bronzed by the same patient sun. That summer, the air seemed denser, the silences longer. The sea no longer belonged to games. It had acquired a rhythm both strange and thrilling, like the pulse of a secret. Phil watched Vinka as she ran barefoot down to the shore, her hair loose, her limbs lean and restless. She was still the same companion of his boyhood, and yet not. A curve of her neck, the quiet gravity in her eyes when she turned toward him, these new things disturbed him. He did not understand why. At night, they would sit together under the tamarisks, watching the horizon fade. Their hands would touch, lightly, accidentally, and the contact sent through him a confusion of pleasure and fear. In the little seaside house, their mothers laughed over card games, unaware that their children had crossed some invisible border. The world around them, ripe and fragrant, seemed to conspire in silence. Phil felt a strange awakening, not in thought, but in his very senses. The world had grown sharper, more alive. The scent of salt, the touch of sand, the way Vinka's voice deepened in the evening air, all these things ached in him, sweetly, unbearably. He could not have said what it was he wanted, only that the days had become both too long and too short, the sea too wide, his body too full of something he could not yet name. And Vinka, though she said nothing, felt it too. Beneath her laughter stirred a faint, trembling gravity, the knowledge that childhood was vanishing, and something beautiful and dangerous was about to begin. The days unfolded like a slow, golden dream. The sun pressed upon the world, drawing out the scent of resin and the low hum of bees. Phil and Vinka moved through it as if through an enchanted haze, their steps echoing the rhythm of the sea. Their friendship had always been simple, a thing of shared games and unspoken trust. But now, something fragile had begun to fracture it. When Phil looked at Vinka, it was no longer as a friend, but as a mystery, one that stirred both desire and guilt. He would watch her swim, her small body slicing through the waves, and feel a mixture of admiration and unease. When she laughed and called his name, the sound pierced him. Sometimes they quarreled, sudden, sharp bursts of anger that left them both trembling. "You've changed," she would say. "You're always thinking of something else." He denied it, though he knew it was true. His dreams were full of strange, restless images, the warmth of skin, the sound of her breath. He began to walk alone at dusk, pretending he was hunting shells, but in truth he was fleeing from the force that frightened him. Then came the woman, the visitor. She was older, a friend of the family, a figure both worldly and languid, with eyes that seemed to see too much. She spoke softly, laughed rarely, and carried the scent of perfume that did not belong to the sea. Phil was drawn to her in a way that made him ashamed. Her presence seemed to offer an escape from the turmoil Vinka had awakened, an escape into something he could mistake for understanding. She spoke to him as if he were already a man. She listened. She let her hand linger on his arm, and one night, when the cicadas sang so loudly it seemed the whole earth trembled, she kissed him. Afterward, the world seemed unreal, the sea darker, the stars more cruel. He thought of Vinka, her laughter, her trust, and something inside him, a fragile, luminous thing, cracked. The ripening had begun, but it came with a taste of bitterness. It was the day of the storm. The heat had been building for hours. heavy and oppressive, until the air itself seemed to shudder. Phil wandered the cliffs, restless, torn between shame and a strange, aching pride. He had crossed a threshold, yet instead of feeling older, he felt lost. He avoided Vinka. Every time he saw her, her eyes accused him, not because she knew, but because she didn't. Her innocence, so clear and unsullied, frightened him more than her anger ever could. That evening, the wind rose, and the first drops of rain struck the windows like thrown pebbles. The family huddled indoors, lamps flickering. Vinka sat by the window, her face pale, her hair damp with salt. "You've changed," she said again, quietly. "Even when you're here, you're far away." He tried to smile, but she stood and faced him. "No, you imagine. You imagine that being a man means forgetting everything we were." Her words struck him harder than he expected. Outside, the storm broke fully, thunder rolling over the sea, lightning flashing across her face. "Vinka," he began, but she shook her head. "Don't. You'll only make it worse." In that moment, he saw her not as the girl he had grown up with, but as something luminous and untouchable. The truth of what he had lost and what he had betrayed rose in him like the tide. The storm raged through the night. He went out into it, walking the cliffs, the rain stinging his face, the wind tearing at his clothes. He felt stripped bare, punished by the very nature he had tried to outgrow. When he returned at dawn, soaked and trembling, Vinka was gone. She had fled into the dunes, her footsteps erased by the storm. He called her name. Once, twice, but only the sea answered, vast and merciless. The world, once ripe with promise, now tasted of salt and loss. The boy was gone. Only the man remained, and the man understood too late what the boy had held. Morning came with a muted light, pale and spent. The storm had passed, but the air still smelled of rain and broken leaves. Phil searched for Vinka among the dunes, his heart tight with fear. He found her near the cove, sitting alone, her knees drawn to her chest. Her dress was wet, her hair tangled with sand. She did not look up when he approached. "Vinka," he whispered. She turned her head slowly. Her eyes were calm now, almost detached. "You were with her," she said. He could not answer. The silence between them was vast, filled with all the words they would never say. "I thought..." Then she stopped. "No, it doesn't matter." "It does. It matters more than anything." But even as he spoke, he knew it was too late. Something irrevocable had passed between them. Childhood, that tender, unthinking trust, had dissolved. In its place was something raw and unformed, an ache, a longing, a knowledge. They sat together in silence as the sea glittered faintly before them. The gulls circled overhead, crying out as if to mock their sorrow. At last, Vinka stood. She said, "We'll go back." They walked side by side, not touching. The world around them seemed both familiar and foreign. The same beach, the same sky, and yet both transformed. That evening, as the sun sank over the horizon, Phil wrote in his journal, "There are days that mark the end of one life and the beginning of another. I think today was one of them." He watched her from the terrace as she braided her hair, the same gesture she had made every summer. But now it was not the gesture of a child. It was a woman's gesture, sure, quiet, self-contained. The seed had ripened, and the ripening he saw was not gentle. It was the breaking of a shell, the pain of emergence, the first step into solitude. The summer drew to its end. The days grew shorter, the wind sharper. The sea changed color, turning from sapphire to steel. Phil and Vinka prepared to leave the coast. Their mothers spoke cheerfully of returning next year, unaware that nothing would ever be the same. They walked one last time along the beach. The sand was cool beneath their feet, and the waves lapped gently, as if erasing the traces of everything that had happened. Vinka was quiet. Her face, still youthful, had acquired a kind of gravity. Phil wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain, but the words felt too small, too late. Instead, they stood watching the horizon. A line of light trembled there, not dawn, not sunset, but the fragile shimmer of something ending. She turned to him at last. "We'll forget, won't we?" He shook his head. "No, we'll remember, but it will hurt less." She smiled faintly. Perhaps that's what growing up means. They walked back in silence. The house loomed behind them, half in shadow. The air was full of the scent of drying grass and the low, patient murmur of the sea. That night, Phil lay awake, listening to the wind. The world seemed vast again, indifferent and full of promise. He felt both older and emptier, yet in some strange way, free. He understood now that the ripening of the seed was not only about desire, but about loss. The loss that makes room for awareness, the silence that follows a broken song. The next morning, the train carried them away from the coast. Through the window, the sea glittered one last time, distant, eternal, forgiving. Phil closed his eyes. In that shimmer, he felt both the wound and the grace of becoming. And the summer, like youth itself, was gone, not dead, but folded into the heart, forever alive in memory's endless tide.